In 1971, a man named Elgin Long took a Piper Navajo around the world from pole to pole. This was the first time this flight had ever been done solo. It has never been repeated. Today on Aviation Stuff, Elgin Long and the Circumpolar flight. Captain Elgen Long is a Navy veteran who flew in seaplanes throughout the Pacific during World War II. He retired as a senior Boeing 747 captain from the Flying Tiger line in 1987, after serving for over 40 years as a pilot, an examiner, instructor, radio operator, and navigator. In 1971, he received worldwide acclaim when he flew solo around the world over both the North and South Poles, setting 15 world records and firsts. Known as the Crossroads flight, the 36,000-mile around-the-world pole-to-pole solo flight has never been duplicated. Long had served with Alaska Airlines and made numerous flights across the North Pacific and to various destinations in Alaska. He had flown with record-setting pilot Bill Odom, and together they had conceived the idea of flying around the world from pole to pole, and the idea even persisted after Odom's death. Long decided he could do it on his own. He favored a Piper Navajo and estimated he could make the flight for about $50,000 $1970. The Flying Tigers and Delco Electronics helped to refit the Navajo. The flight was sanctioned by the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, or the FAI, and the National Aeronautics Association, or NAA, so that he could claim the world record if he was successful. He had to fly the aircraft all over the country to get the special equipment installed, especially the Inertial Navigation System, or INS, and then move the aircraft up to Fairbanks, Alaska. On November 5, 1971, the official pole-to-pole flight began out of Fairbanks. Long next flew over the North Pole to Stockholm, Sweden. Since all directions are south heading away from the North Pole, Long had to use celestial navigation, as compasses would not work at the North Pole. He had to find the right south because, as I mentioned, from the North Pole, all directions are south. He made precise calculations using the positions of the sun, moon, and stars. From Stockholm, his next destination was London, England. Upon landing in London, he was greeted by his wife. Following a short stay in London, his next stop was Accra, Ghana. Each stop was very busy with refueling, flight planning, finding hotels, dealing with the media, and of course, making sure to get proper sleep. When the Navajo's fuel tanks were topped off, they provided fuel for about 24 hours, but Long sometimes only filled them halfway to keep the weight down. Fortunately, the airplane performed well throughout the entire flight. The next stop was Recife in Brazil, where once again he was met by his wife and a small army of reporters. In Recife, some critical repairs were made to his Inertial Navigation System, or INS, computer system. The final stop in South America was at Punta Arenas, Chile, on the Straits of Magellan. On November 21st, he flew over Cape Horn and headed straight to the South Pole. Initially, the weather was perfect, but once he approached Antarctica, he was advised through the American Navy station at Palmer Peninsula that the weather was marginal at the pole and worse at McMurdo. Being a former Navy man, he had made sure to establish good contacts with the Navy through Admiral Arleigh Burke well in advance of this trip. As a result, he had received official permission to make the flight, and the Navy went one step further, providing a ski-equipped C-130 to the pole in case rescue was necessary. He flew over the Beardmore and Liv glaciers and crossed the Ross Ice Shelf to McMurdo Sound. He arrived safely in McMurdo before the foul weather hit. He had to wait 18 hours at McMurdo before he could continue his journey due to weather. His INS navigational system worked very well, and his next flight was the first ever solo flight made from Antarctica to Australia while passing over the South Magnetic Pole. He had now been to the South Pole, the Magnetic South Pole, the North Pole, and the Magnetic North Pole. He was also the first man to cross the Antarctic continent solo via the South Pole and land on the continent, a feat that may have been his greatest claim to fame. His wife and numerous media types greeted him in Sydney. By this time, the Crossroads flight from pole to pole was front page news. His next leg had him stop at Fiji and Howland Island, the place where Amelia Earhart disappeared. He crossed the equator at the 180th meridian, the international date line. Since that is the point where all meridians converge, it's thought of as the crossroads of the world, both in geography and time. thus the name of the flight, the Crossroads flight. At Wake Island, he was the last ever guest to stay in the Pan American Hotel, since that hotel was being abandoned due to Pan Am no longer using Wake Island as a stopover point. He made a leg to Tokyo, his seventh continent of the flight, and planned to fly directly from Tokyo to Honolulu, but due to bad weather forecast, he diverted back to Wake Island. From there, he flew on to Honolulu and then San Francisco, which was the final stop. He was met there by some 300 people, including his wife, an army of media personnel, and even the famous actress Shirley Temple. The flight had been so successful that Long said he was sorry when it ended. Elgin Long had flown 36,000 miles, the longest sanctioned solo flight ever made. Honors and accolades followed. In Paris, he received the FAI's Gold Air Medal, and Piper Aircraft even commissioned a film about the flight, called A Man, a Plane, and a Dream. He was even able to recoup all of the money he had invested in the flight due to private donations. After this, Elgin Long was not idle. His next project was to write a book on the Amelia Earhart expedition. He has personally been to the South Pacific twice in search of her aircraft and is an active member of TGAR, the organization that tries to find out what happened to her. He went on to author many books and become a premier Amelia Earhart researcher, and I'm glad to say that he is still with us at the age of 90 years young. He also has a website, elginlong.com. Well, this is Captain Max of Aviation Stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this little bit of history into a wonderful but sadly all too forgotten flight. And to Captain Elgin Long, congratulations on a job well done.